currently a technical staff member and quantum community lead at the Unitary Fund and has spent much of her career developing new quantum hardware in the lab. From building satellites to hacking quantum cryptography hardware, communicating what is so exciting about quantum is her passion. She loves building new demos, tools, and relationships to help enable the quantum open source community to grow. Hello, Sarah. Thank you for being here. We're delighted to have you. Please take it away anytime when you're ready.
Hey, everybody. Let me just get my screen shared here. Yes. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much again, everybody, for joining me, especially for the last talk of the day. I'm in Seattle, so I'm glad this means I didn't have to be up quite so early. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today about what I do and what I've learned about communicating specifically about quantum technology on kind of modern platforms and in current communities. So yeah, as noted, I'm a technical staff and quantum community lead at Unitary Fund. I do a lot of things in quantum outreach stuff. So I do Twitch streaming, quantum programming. I've actually, just as of last week, the textbook I wrote with one of my research collaborators, Chris Grenade, is now finally out in print. And I do, given I live in Seattle, I also spend a lot of time outdoors doing hiking and kayaking. So yeah, that's kind of, oh, and my dog joins me on stream a lot. I have exiled him for the purposes of this talk, though. So how did I actually get to working at Unitary Fund and being effectively a quantum software developer? In undergrad, I kind of knew I liked both math and physics, but I really couldn't decide whether I wanted to do theory or experiment. All I knew is I liked burning things with lasers. And so I basically tried to focus my path around how I could continue to work on specifically laser and optic technologies. I, in preparation for grad school, didn't end up doing that well on my GRE exams and did not get into any grad programs. So I decided to kind of pivot and I guess kind of take a gap year, and I ended up being a software developer for actually Wolfram Research. This was a very, very informative experience, learning about kind of what it looks like in classical computing to be a software dev. And I decided I definitely want to go back to grad school. So once there, I actually did find some really cool projects in quantum computing and I guess specifically quantum cryptography, where I could burn things with lasers and do the really cool math that I enjoyed about quantum computing, which was, you know, kind of the general idea that we can do things with matrices and not have to solve like triple integrals and all kinds of other perhaps less fun types of math. But grad school wasn't all great. I struggled with a lot of different issues at the university with respect to harassment and discrimination. So it wasn't, the research was fun, but the entire experience wasn't so great. Afterwards, I ended up doing a postdoc in Sydney, Australia, which the location was great, but it was pretty funny. When I started there, I had a 1-year contract and our lab flooded 2 weeks in and destroyed our cryostat. So I ended up having to kind of make up a new project once I started there. And it actually turned out to be leveraging some of those skills I had learned about software development, both from my previous industry experience, as well as kind of what I had needed all along to automate my experiments. Like, I'm sure a fair few of you have sat in the lab or even, you know, solving things on paper where you just sit and kind of do a somewhat repetitive manual task. So I always had the quality of many programmers of being lazy. So I wanted to find a way to get a computer to do that for me. So you can see In the top picture, basically one of the automated setups I had for doing like optical tomography, which was really fun and was a great kind of pivot or recovery of my postdoc projects. After that, though, I really kind of was like, maybe I want to do more of this software development stuff. I liked it because it meant I didn't have to have millions of dollars of equipment to do so. And so, yeah, I ended up moving. Oh, I guess I forgot the video played. So yeah, I moved to Seattle and, kind of felt a little bit stuck because there wasn't any quantum roles or jobs here in Seattle, or at least for my expertise. And so I just kind of took the time to learn a little bit more about what it means to be a software developer, and in particular, what it means to teach other people what software development looks like. And I ended up finding a really, really amazing resource, which were basically open source programming meetup groups. Given Seattle is a pretty active tech city, there were tons and tons here that I could try out. And I ended up finding a couple that I really, really liked, like Pi Ladies and R Ladies and stuff like that. And I just, seeing this model that I thought worked really, really well, I was like, this seems like something I want to help build for quantum computing. And so I started kind of taking both my research expertise, the software development skills I was building up, and started giving talks and kind of demos of what it looks like to program for a quantum computer. Part of that is like automating experiments, but the other part is actually using tools like Q# and Python and stuff like that to write programs or algorithms that we might want to run on a quantum computer. So at that point, I was basically doing independent consulting for stuff. So I didn't really have a formal job. And I ended up applying for a micro grant. I heard of the Unitary Fund actually from Twitter, and had this idea with one of my previous office mates from grad school, actually, to look to kind of research and implement some quantum memories, algorithms for quantum memories, and use kind of some of these new software tools to actually profile them and characterize them. There were lots of proposals out there, but nobody had actually ever tried to program these circuits or these algorithms. So we just wanted to try it out and use some of the great like kind of profiling or kind of cost modeling tools in the software. We use Q# actually in particular, but it was actually a really, really fun project. And we also live streamed a lot of the work. So basically what would happen is a couple times a week, I would hop on Twitch. My collaborators would join in chat, or sometimes like on voice, but I'd share a link to my, basically in VS Code, you can do something kind of like Google Docs where you can send people a link and they can join and they can write code and kind of collaborate real time. And so that's basically how we developed a lot of the libraries. I'd start typing, we'd chat, and I think this was just a really, really cool experience to take this research project and basically do it live and in public. Suffice it to say, I forget a lot of semicolons, and I really appreciate all the times people in chat told me, you forgot that, or I spelled something wrong, because goodness, I am not good at spelling. And kind of after the success of that project and, all the kind of interesting things I had done, with this live streaming, the folks at the Unitary Fund reached out and were like, hey, do you want to do that for us? And now I work at the Unitary Fund as a full-time staff member. And it's honestly like basically my dream job. So I do all kinds of Twitch talks and stuff with some, with open source quantum developers. I just actually got done running a hackathon. But our overall goal is creating a quantum technology ecosystem that benefits the most people. You can see a link. You can learn more about us here at unitary.fund. kind of our, just as a TLDR, we are a nonprofit and we kind of do two main things. We give out these 4K micro grants to quantum technology projects. It can be software, kind of like the one I showed you earlier, but we also give micro grants to communities, whether like some of our grantees just developed a Discord and got swag for their members. Some folks used it to develop educational materials or open source textbooks. So, when we say to benefit everyone, we mean that. And the other aspect of what we do is also kind of doing our own open source development and research to kind of fill gaps that we see in the quantum computing software stack. So to kind of get more into the topic of today, what is the quantum community? So in general, I kind of think of this as, communities are spaces for work and learning. There are some obvious ones like your academic institutions, meetup groups, but you could view contributors to an open source project as a community. Journals and conferences, both, the editorial staff and the contributors, or like the accepted authors, that's a community. Social media groups, whether that be a Facebook group or, a Twitter. I guess there isn't really a collection of Twitter users, but like folks who generally interact on Twitter. These are all examples of communities. And so some of them, it's kind of obvious where to find them, like social media. Obviously, they're on social media. But there are a number of tools that folks use to actually facilitate communication amongst the members of the community. So some of the most popular ones that you might have heard of before are like Slack and Discord. There's definitely some that are like forum mailing list based. Given the amount of email we all tend to get at this point, sometimes I find those a little bit challenging to use. But conferences are another great example of communities. Generally, once you go to a conference, you probably end up going to it, a couple times. And so like you see the same people there and you really kind of build up relationships that way. And some or all of these may also have physical spaces, whether it's, a Discord specific to a university. So maybe there might be a physical space where you end up meeting, obviously not right now in the COVID times. So I want to just kind of, in case you haven't heard of some of the more popular tools here, just kind of give you a brief overview or idea of what the pros and cons and what they look like. Actually, the screenshot I have here is of Discord, which you'll notice, and this is actually kind of my preferred one. I've pretty much migrated all of my communities that I manage here to Discord. But the pros are basically, you have integrated voice channels, so you don't have to kind of like manage Zoom links and, try to coordinate calls and all of that stuff. I mean, how many times have I had to either had the wrong Zoom link or need to email everybody because I changed something about the invite. It also has really easy moderation. So there's ways to categorize users with certain permission levels and make it easy to kind of like, it's very granular in what you can kind of set up. And they also have a really neat feature called announcements channels, which makes it really easy to do cross-posting. So, previously, one of the things I spent a lot of time on is, when I had an event or, something I was going to do on Twitch, how do you let people know about it when there's so many different communities and places where they are? I would spend a lot of time going through and like posting on a lot of these different, whether it be Reddit, different Slacks, different Discords. So what I have kind of started organizing is a lot of the quantum communities on Discord have these kind of cross-posting links set up. So it just automatically publishes kind of like an RSS feed to all the different communities. Some cons about Discord are it's kind of less common for folks to be familiar with, especially if they're a little bit older. Mostly where Discord comes from, like historically, was basically a chat live streaming platform for folks doing gaming. But really, the kind of, especially over COVID, this tool and platform kind of exploded in popularity, and yeah, now I think it's starting to get about as common as Slack. Another con that I could put out there is, while it's more configurable, that means there's a lot more to customize if you want. The defaults are usually pretty good, but sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming to do all the setup that you might want to. So a couple really quick tips that I have if you are interested in setting up a Discord: turn the default notifications to only at mentions. This just basically means new people who sign up don't get spammed with notifications for everything that gets posted anywhere. You should make it a community server, which basically unlocks a couple new features, like being able to enforce a code of conduct before people join. This is absolutely critical for me in any community space that I participate or help create. You can make things like welcome screens, and you can also, once the server is large enough, get analytics, which can help you understand, like, you know, where in the world people are joining your Discord from, what sorts of platforms are they doing it mobile, or they do it on desktop, stuff like that. You should set up a moderation role, which, as to a later point, will help reduce the stress on you to kind of like constantly monitor everything. And one of the other really cool things about Discord is there are a ton of different just open source bots that you can add. You can even inspect the code that they, that backs them if you want to. But there's a lot that can really make it easy for like scheduling things, sending welcome messages and messaging everyone on the Discord in DMs, doing role assigns. So roles are basically like tags you can put on people, or people can elect to put on themselves for things like pronouns or what they're interested in. And I forgot to put it on here, but Discord is entirely free. There are paid sort of subscription things at the individual level as well as at the server level, but they're mostly cosmetic. Really, the only other thing that paying for gets you is higher bandwidth video streams and audio streams. But the default is quite usable. So another the other most common platform that I see kind of in practice and in the community is Slack. Pros, lots of folks already have this. This is a pretty common tool, both in industry and software development, but also as I've seen actually in research groups. Because sometimes you need something that's, I don't know, I get a lot of anxiety around writing emails all the time. I don't know if anybody else has this, but it seems really formal to send an email. And, sometimes I'd rather just send a chat or something like that. And, I guess you could text everyone, but, this is kind of another way to basically send chat-like text messages or chat-like messages to everyone on your team or community. Some of the cons are it's not free, like the not free parts can be kind of limiting. So it limits, the history of your messages and stuff like that. And it's a little bit harder to customize. They have a little bit more restrictive kind of bot environment. That doesn't mean that there aren't any, but it's just in general, I think, a little bit harder to develop for. So again, you'll want to have, when you set up a Slack, have a way for folks to accept a code of conduct. I actually recently found a really cool tool called Slackin, which basically is like a pre-landing page that sends folks invites to your Slack, but only after they've kind of accepted a code of conduct on like this first landing page. So before, I had no idea how to do that on Slack. Definitely configure your info channels and make sure so those are kind of like admin post only, but describe either what happens on your Slack or where to post things, or just kind of like general info, and make sure to make that the default join channel. And find bots that work for you again. One of the ones that I found is really helpful on Discord is called Donut, which is a kind of nice like introduction, like it sets up introductions between your members, either like one-on-one or, you know, kind of like small groups so people can get to know each other. I see someone ask a question, have you managed to collaborate with Discord if it's such a beneficial tool for the community? Yeah, definitely. Apart from doing the live streaming on that previous project that I mentioned with the micro grant I got, we did everything on like any async discussion that didn't make exactly sense to put in GitHub issues, we totally did in Discord. So, you know, just scheduling, coordination, discussing topics more generally. The Discord that I help run for the Unitary Fund, actually, we are basically constantly having collaboration discussions, like a lot of quantum open source projects are on there, and as well as the maintainers. And so they like to discuss things there, and then it's really easy to get community feedback. So if you have like, certainly you can do this for say a research group, and then, you know, everyone in your research group can comment. But, you know, some of these larger communities that are like people interested in quantum machine learning, it can be really helpful to, you know, both for students to kind of like learn and follow along with what is the kind of general discussion in the field, but also, you know, for different research folks that may not have had, you know, kind of the exposure or ability or even the knowledge about who else is kind of working on the same things. Normally we'd get that, of course, from seeing papers that people publish or going to conferences, but that's kind of a high latency sort of method. So I think, you know, using tools like Discord and Slack can help kind of reduce the hamming distance between these different code words. Reduce the distance between these communities. I think that's maybe the only quantum joke I'll make here. So some other kind of general tips or things that I've learned when trying to organize with these platforms and with communities in general. Probably the most important thing is be as consistent as possible. When things, you know, kind of are sporadic, like you can totally do that, but it really does kind of make it harder for folks to anticipate and like block off that time. And I found generally you get a lot more engagement when you advertise at least 2 weeks in advance. Sometimes I forget, and then I feel really bad about it. Certainly people will still come, but, you know, having platforms like Meetup, or you can actually do RSVPs and calendar invites through bots on Discord and Slack. So there are lots of ways to make it as easy as possible for people to join your events. The second would be here, social media can be really hard to get traction in, like, especially if there isn't kind of an existing like university organization sort of handle that you can kind of build off of. But it can be a really powerful way to connect people. I know that like when I started going to conferences in physics, like the main way I stayed in touch with people I met at those conferences was on Twitter. And like there are plenty that still today, we are constantly interacting on Twitter, even though we haven't seen each other in years and, you know, don't even do similar research things or never did similar research things. So it is challenging, but I would encourage you to at least try. You know, whether that be creating a Facebook page or a Twitter handle or something like that, because it's a great way to kind of get out there what you're working on. And thirdly, find other similar groups. Like, likely if there is something that you kind of wish there was a community for, try looking, because there are a ton out there already. That doesn't, there may still not be one exactly what you're looking for. And as we'll see later, maybe creating one is the right answer at that point. But finding similar groups can also help you find people who might be interested in your, what you want to be working on. So in summary, kind of the 3 takeaways I'd put to you for this is you can't do it all yourself. I've tried too many times to manage too many communities, do too many things. Make sure you don't burn out on this, and find folks that you can trust to kind of help split the work, whether they be other lab group members or like other interested folks that you know who are really engaged in your community. Like, ask them if they want to be moderators. It's pretty great. A lot of times they'll say yes. Another really, really important one is meeting folks where they are. If you really want to use a particular platform, but that isn't where most of the people that you want to connect with are, asking them to join your community, like there's an extra activation energy that you're adding there. Obviously, some people will have that and still be willing to join you, but sometimes that can be like a you'll end up post-selecting on only those people with enough activation energy. And so just try to figure out like where, if people, a lot of them are on Facebook or a lot of them are on Twitter, try those for the social media engagement. And lastly, inclusion in safe spaces take effort. It's not just a given. You can't assume that everybody will treat everybody with respect. You as the organizer or moderator or facilitator have to take active efforts to make sure that everyone is welcome and safe. So lastly, some very quick tips on what you can do to grow the quantum community. So 1, as I kind of mentioned before, I learned a lot about this community development from open source software communities, and they have a ton of resources that are really, really helpful. To just give you some ideas, like obviously you don't have to do everything, some of it's not applicable, but use that as kind of a starting place. And I'll try to put all the links from here on my Twitter afterwards if you want to find them, to click them. Things I generally kind of require in my communities are making sure you have a code of conduct. As per the earlier point, this is how you make sure people are safe and included. Ask people for pronouns. I always try to, when there's somewhere I can put my name, I put my pronouns to kind of help normalize that. That again is a good way to help kind of signal to folks that everyone is welcome here. Other things that are kind of really important to me are accessibility. So you notice I have live captions going on above the slides, thinking about, color contrast, fonts. There's a lot of things to think about, but again, looking at some of these resources, also this NumFocus group has a really, really good, they call it a cookbook for tons of different ideas for all of these categories here. And finding and supporting diverse members and contributions is also really, really important, whether that be financial or helping set up mentorships for those community members. As we talked about before, find and create a quantum community. There are obviously a ton out there already. I mentioned only a very small amount here. And I actually, as a part of the Unitary Fund, we started actually an awesome quantum community list where I'm trying to kind of collect as many different communities as I can find so that it's easier for folks to kind of browse them like an index and see where you want to plug in and connect with the communities. Another important piece here, though, is we really should understand how the quantum research and industry communities influence these communities. There can be some really toxic practices or just big challenges that folks coming from those communities bring to our spaces, and to just kind of be aware of that. And lastly, contribute. Once you found the community, contribute to them. It's really a great opportunity for professional development and growing the community. You can often put participating and helping out with these communities on your CV, which can be very helpful. Find a group. There's also a lot of groups in different languages. So if English isn't perhaps your first language, find one that is in your native language, or in a location that is near you, so that when in-person meetups become a thing, you can do that. And they're just a really great way to network and find mentors or mentor others. I think that's one of the biggest things communities can help with. These are some other ideas of ways you can contribute. You can practice giving talks. You can start study groups. I've seen all of these as examples. You can contribute to open source software projects. You can, if you have group meetings or something for your research, try making them public. Say on your Discord. This is actually what we do at the Unitary Fund. All of our sprints and discussions about our open source projects are actually just public for people to join. And try expanding, the group's online presence. There's good ways to make free web pages with GitHub pages, help them set up a Twitter or Insta or Facebook, whatever. And using tools like Linktree can make it easy to kind of like send people one link or use link shorteners. Those can be really useful. So in summary, communities of people make quantum technologies, and let's make it a welcoming and safe community for everyone to contribute. Thank you so much. Sorry, I went a little bit over, but please feel free to connect with me on, so my website is sarahkaiser.dev. I'm mostly very much on Twitter, so you can ping me there, and you can also connect with me or the Unitary Fund more generally. We also have a pretty active Twitter, and yeah, if you're interested in supporting the nonprofit or mentoring or contributing, or even if you have announcements that you want us to share, let us know. It looks like there is a question. Are there any communities that you recommend our attendees might be interested in? Yeah, so I think I'm assuming that a lot of the attendees here are kind of students or, kind of thinking about their careers in quantum. So yeah, I think my short answer will be check out the awesome quantum community list for different, that's basically the meta list. But, honestly, like the Unitary Fund Discord, we actually have an index there of other quantum related Discords. There's a lot that are basically self-organized from students to like practice things with each other and do study groups, do journal clubs. And there's some of the most active groups that I see. And I think they're really great ways to kind of both network and develop your skills. Cool.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the talk. It was great to hear about all this. I mean, it's not kind of something we hear about very often, all these platforms. So it was really, really nice. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. It would be great if you could put all the resources you mentioned in the Slack channel, if you have a chance. It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
So people know where to find them. I guess the same for this last question about good communities to join. It would be nice to have it there. I think we're running a bit over time, but we can put if there are any other questions in the Slack as well, so people can have a look at those too. But thank you so much for the talk. It was really interesting, and we're real happy to have you here, and hope to see you around.
Yeah. Thank you so much for everybody for listening, and see you online.
Thank you.